So we've got 2020 Hyundai Kona engine, and I guess this is the wiring diagram of the cooling fan and its relays. The direction of the coolant flow would be starting, like, let's say if you were to start here, it would go through this pipe up into this area where the radiator cap is, and we have a little bypass to the overflow coolant, which is over here, and so it goes through here down into a pipe, or a hose, sorry, that's over here into the inlet, and then through the radiator, which is hidden behind the fan, and then if you can see into here at the very bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but it's where it comes out, and then kind of underneath the alternator is where the thermostat is. And then this one's hard to see, but there is a bypass hose like way in there, which it would go through when the thermostat is not open, and circulate through the water jackets of the engine. And then back here is where the entrance, the entrance to the heater core, and then it leaves through here. And then this hose comes up. It comes up. And then I don't really know if you can see it, but there is the heat sensor right there, which then would circulate it either back through the engine and back into the radiator right here. And then down below you can see other coolant hoses, which I believe are for the automatic transmission fluid. So you have the inlet, which is on the top one, and then the bottom one would then put it back through the system. Those are kind of hidden underneath there. And I guess explaining how the radiator works on this one is it's one of those cross, so it would go sideways and then through that inlet and then through the radiator down through the bottom here, and as pointed at the beginning of the video, it would then leave through the bottom of that hose there, assuming that the thermostat, which would be fully open. And then the fan relays are, we have one here, which I believe is the main fan, and there's a fan relay here, and so I've gone out and I've made one of those fancy bypass tools that you showed us. And I don't really know if I can do this with one hand, but I'll do my best. If I put the bypass into that slot right there and into this one, I don't know if you can hear it, but the fan is turned on. I can feel air blowing through it. And then of course, if I take it off, the fan stops. And then we know that the fan works, unlike the Hyundai or that both cars in the shop. So plug that back in. Some leak points on this vehicle, if it was to start leaking eventually, would be at like these clamps that you'd find around the engine right here. So this guy, there's one down there. I'm pretty sure there's one on that bypass hose, but it's really hard to see just for the location of where it is. Of course, it could also leak at the radiator where the drain plug is, if that was to become old or corroded. What else do we have here? It could also leak down over here. Sorry, the camera's blurry. But by where the heater core is, there is also 2 clamps there that it could potentially leak from. And then, of course, it could also leak down here where we see other 2 clamps. This is a relatively new vehicle, so I don't imagine that it is leaking or going to be leaking anytime soon. And by saying that, it is a Hyundai, so you never know. Going back to the relay, the 2 big prongs would be the power source to this relay, and then the smaller ones are going to be the actual switch, which then engages when the engine is at the operating temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one back in. I believe this would be an 87 prong right here, 86, 30, and then 85. To answer some of the questions, the condition created if the thermostat was completely shut, the car would eventually overheat, and potentially, well, not potentially, but very likely damage the engine. If it was slightly seized open, you would get maybe some coolant like going through the engine. It would cool it down, but potentially not up to operating standards. And then, of course, if it was seized completely open, the vehicle would be really far away from the operating temperatures. The extended driving periods or heavy loads could potentially damage the vehicle. As far as the plastic water pump impeller was not turning on a VW engine, essentially what would happen is the impeller would crack, then eventually loosen off the bearings, and then potentially damage the water pump. And then, if not replaced, would do severe damage to the engine itself. Water pump, before I forget, almost looked over that one. The water pump is this guy. I believe is hard to see. I'm about 90% sure it's that one right there. That's where the water pump is. The thermostat, like I said, it's hard to see, is connected. I would imagine that is it. It is just hard to see when looking through the top of this engine.